In the news tonight, His Majesty publishes his 5th discussion paper saying Jordan's homegrown reforms are most stable and sustainable option to protect the country from regional chaos. The U.S. Secretary of State says Egypt has a critical role to play in countering the Islamic State group's ideology during a visit to Cairo, the last leg of a trip to build support for U.S. plans to strike ISIS militants. And Saudi Arabia has introduced an Ebola screening program as it prepares to receive up to 3 million pilgrims for the Hajj. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. His Majesty King Abdullah has said parts of the Middle East have fallen victim to sectarian conflict, terrorism and extremist ideology which affects the future of an entire generation. However, he said that Jordan's gradual and homegrown reform that ensure the participation of all Jordanians in building their future are best, most stable and sustainable option to protect the country from the regional chaos. In his 5th discussion paper published today, His Majesty said challenges are not an excuse to postpone the kingdom's reform agenda, but to convert them to opportunities. The document is entitled Goals, Achievements and Conventions, Pillars for Deepening Our Democratic Transition. Through this 5th discussion paper, His Majesty said he aims to take stock of the milestone we have already achieved on 3 parallel tracks: legislative milestone, institutional milestones, and milestones for actors in our political system. His Majesty said that Jordan has succeeded in creating its own spring by genuinely embracing the opportunity to speed up existing political reform efforts. Our Jordanian spring, he said, must also continue to demonstrate respect and embrace dialogue, accept the reciprocity of rights and responsibility as citizens, accept that shared sacrifices lead to shared gains, turn disagreement into finding compromise and active and constructive participation by all citizens. Stakeholders in the political system, including the monarch, MPs, government, political parties and citizens, must internalize and apply these values and practices in playing their national role and exercising their responsibilities. His Majesty concluded by reiterating that security, democracy and prosperity reinforce each other as the foundations for the future. King Abdullah said his next discussion paper will focus on the imperative and opportunity for designing a new and sustainable economic model to improve the prosperity of all Jordanians in light of his directive to the government to develop a national economic blueprint for the next decade. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi discussed with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry bilateral and regional affairs, including the threats imposed by the Islamic State. Kerry is on the last leg of his Middle East tour to build support for U.S. to strike ISIS militants. Egypt, however, is unlikely to send troops to battle the IS group, but could provide logistical and intelligence support. Kerry also held talks with Arab League Secretary General Nabil al-Arabi. The two sides discussed a variety of topics, including issues on fundamentalism in the region. At a joint press conference with Kerry, Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri said global action was needed to counter the threat of IS, as ties existed between the group and other militants in the region. Kerry said Egypt is on the front lines of extremist threats and has a critical role to play in countering the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria's group ideology.
An intellectual and cultural capital of the Muslim world, Egypt has a critical role to play in publicly renouncing the ideology that ISIL disseminates. This was a very important feature of our discussions in Jeddah and again today here in Cairo. And it is something that the Egyptian religious establishments at Al-Azhar and Dar al-Ifta, they both fully support and understand.
Egypt has always been a caller of the importance of the international community joining forces to confront fundamentalism and terrorism, which are done under an Islamic cover, but in reality take place for political interests and use military and monstrous means that do not comply with today's time or the interests of the people of the region.
Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi said he ordered his air force to halt strikes on civilian areas, addressing a condition set by Sunni Muslim tribal figures to support his campaign against Islamic State fighters. Al-Abadi said the order had been issued on Thursday. On the same day, barrel bombs were dropped on Fallujah city, killing 22 civilians. The United Nations representative in Iraq welcomed the comments, which were repeated by Al-Abadi at a conference about refugees in Baghdad. Right groups say Iraqi government attacked this year, many of them in areas held by the Islamic State, which controls 1/3 of the country, have indiscriminately targeted civilians. And in Washington, U.S. President Barack Obama laid out his administration's strategy for combating the Islamic State organization in Iraq and Syria by forming a broad coalition against the group. In his weekly address, Obama vowed to degrade and ultimately destroy the organization. However, he insisted that the conflict with the Islamic State can't be America's fight alone. In an address to the nation on Wednesday, Obama announced his decision to authorize U.S. airstrikes against IS targets in Syria for the first time and to add to targeted areas in Iraq.
What's needed now is a targeted, relentless counterterrorism campaign against ISIL that combines American air power, contributions from allies and partners, and more support to forces that are fighting these terrorists on the ground. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're moving ahead with our campaign of airstrikes against these terrorists, and we're prepared to take action against ISIL in Syria as well. The additional American forces I've ordered to Iraq will help Iraqi and Kurdish forces with the training, intelligence, and equipment they need to take the fight to these terrorists on the ground.
Meanwhile, Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu said U.S. action in Iraq was necessary but would not be enough on its own to bring about political stability. Davutoglu's remark is in an interview with Turkish Canal 24 television, came after a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in Ankara. Turkey has so far conspicuously avoided committing to any military campaign. U.S. officials played down hopes of persuading Ankara to take a significant role in any military involvement, saying talks between Davutoglu and Kerry focused on issues including Turkey's effort to stem the flow of foreign fighters crossing its territory and its role in providing humanitarian assistance. Underground fighters from the Shiite group, the Mahdi Army and the Iraqi Army unit said they have pushed back Islamic State fighters from the village of Ilbu Hassan in Hamadli region in Salah ad-Din province. Shelling could be heard in the area with Katyusha rockets carrying out strikes. An Iraqi Army colonel said that following the break of the siege of Hamadli, fighters managed to liberate some of the villages around it. He added that their furthest position is about 400 meters from ISIS position. Pope Francis has warned that a piecemeal World War III may have already begun with the current spate of crimes, massacre and destruction. The Pope was speaking at a Mass during a visit to Italy's largest war memorial, where he was commemorating the centenary of World War I. The Pontiff has often condemned the idea of war in God's name.
Falls in a somber Mass held by Pope Francis in northern Italy, marking 100 years since the start of the First World War. He's visiting the country's largest war memorial, where some 15,000 soldiers from 5 nations of the Austro-Hungarian Empire lost their lives. Thousands brave the rain to hear his words and reflect on the past. The Pope warns the faithful of a third world war.
Trovandomi qui Finding myself here, in this place, near this cemetery, I am able to say only one thing. War is madness. Even today, after the second failure of another world war, perhaps one can speak of a third war, one fought piecemeal, with crimes, massacres, destruction.
Guerra combattuta a pezzi. During the memorial, a bugle plays, setting an ominous tone reminding those here of the human cost of war.
Qatar has asked 7 senior figures from Egypt's outlawed Muslim Brotherhood to leave the country following months of pressure from its neighbors to stop backing the Islamists. A senior Brotherhood official based in London said the departure did not mean a rupture in ties between Qatar and the Brotherhood. Tensions over Qatar's support for the Brotherhood led Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and the UAE to withdraw their ambassadors from Doha in March. A spokesman for Egypt's foreign ministry said he had no idea if Qatar had expelled Brotherhood leaders and declined to comment further until Cairo had examined the issue. Saudi authorities have introduced an Ebola screening program as the country prepares to receive up to 3 million pilgrims taking part in the Hajj, many of whom will be traveling from Nigeria. The director of Jeddah's King Abdulaziz International Airport's Health Surveillance Center said all passengers will be checked and every pilgrim on board a plane must fill in a medical questionnaire that will be collected by Ministry of Health staff. He added that in case of a patient being diagnosed with Ebola, a rapid reaction team standing by takes them straight to a hospital. Saudi Arabia has barred pilgrims from Sierra Leone, Liberia and Guinea from the Hajj due to Ebola concerns, but will allow Nigerians to attend as the outbreak of the disease in Nigeria is smaller and less worrying. A unique beauty pageant in the United Arab Emirates to find the world's most beautiful falcon attracted competitors from around the world. The 3-day contest in Abu Dhabi was part of this year's International Hunting and Equestrian Exhibition. The falcons are judged from head to toe, and according to those measurements, they are giving a grade. UNESCO included falconry in its list of intangible heritage of humanity in 2010.
Strict standards. First of all, they must have the correct CITES papers, which is a registration that shows their ring number and their species. Then we do measuring of the wing, of the tail, of the chest of the falcon. Then we have a look at the head, the eyes, the body, the legs. So we check it from head to toe, each single part of this falcon. And then according to those measures, we are giving a grade. Then all these grades are counted, and then the falcon who has the highest points will be the winner of the Falcon Beauty Contest. So it's a big challenge for the falcons.
The Blue Moon Diamond, a rare blue diamond with a color as deep as the ocean, went on display at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles. The 12-carat flawless gem on loan from diamond manufacturer Cora International will be on view in the museum until January next year. Cora International acquired the diamond for about $26 million. The piece has been categorized as an extremely significant find because of its unique color, clarity and size.
So during all the stages, the photograph, tested, also designed. Yeah, but our expertise helped us to create that size. It's a good internally flawless.
We begin with tennis and the Davis Cup. Italy kept alive their hopes of reaching the Davis Cup with double duo Fabio Fognini and Simone Bolelli, winning a 5-set rubber against Swiss pair Stanislav Wawrinka and Marco Chiudinelli, training 2-love after Roger Federer and Wawrinka both won yesterday's single matches. Fognini and Bolelli had no margin for error. They produced a battling display in front of a sea of Swiss fans in the PAL Expo Arena to win 7-5, 3-6, 5-7, 6-3, 6-2. Italy is seeking to reach the final for the first time since 1998. Racing teams and fans prepare for the first Formula E electric car championship race in Beijing. Final testing got underway ahead of the race that will see drivers push the latest in electric car technology to the limit in a bid to be crowned champion. The race will get underway tonight with drivers completing 25 laps in a circuit around the iconic Bird's Nest Stadium. 10 teams are participating in the Beijing race, the first in a series of 10 that will take place around the world over the next 10 months. Race organizers say by the second season, teams will be able to design and develop their own cars. And finally, for a quick look at the weather forecast, the kingdom will be affected tonight and tomorrow by high pressure, therefore becoming chilly at night in hilly areas. As for tomorrow, fair and relatively warm conditions are expected in most parts of the country, while winds will be northwesterly moderate, picking up at times. The Gulf of Aqaba can expect fair conditions tonight, but not tomorrow. Northerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty publishes his 5th discussion paper saying Jordan's homegrown reforms are in the most stable and sustainable option to protect the countries from regional chaos. The U.S. Secretary of State says Egypt has a critical role to play in countering the Islamic State group's ideology during a visit to Cairo, the last leg of a trip to build support for U.S. plans to strike ISIS militants. And Saudi Arabia has introduced an Ebola screening program as it prepares to receive up to 3 million pilgrims for the Hajj. And with this, we come to an end. I'm Farah Ajlouni. Thank you for watching and have a good night.